The chandeliers glittered like frozen stars above the ballroom of the Rosenthal estate, their crystal arms catching the candlelight in ways that made even breath feel expensive. The string quartet played something soft and important in the corner, while women in silk gowns floated like ghosts across the polished marble, each one a curated masterpiece. Waiters moved with military grace, balancing trays of champagne that shimmered like liquid gold. It was the kind of world that didn't just whisper wealth, it screamed it from velvet-lined walls. Leila Torres kept her head down. She clutched the last centerpiece in her arms like a shield, her fingers slightly numb from the cold air conditioning that clashed with the warmth of her nerves. The arrangement was her best garden roses and wild lilacs, tied with silk ribbon she'd salvaged from a discount bin and carefully ironed at home. It was supposed to go near the main stage, but the planners had changed their mind last minute, and she'd been asked to place it inside the ballroom herself. Just in, just out, invisible. But stepping into that space was like crossing into a different galaxy. The music swelled, and the eyes followed, dozens of them, unfamiliar, sharp, and dripping with judgment. Leila's throat tightened. Maybe it was the dress. She had borrowed it from a former client, a woman who'd once said it was too plain for her tastes. Charcoal gray silk, simple neckline, cinched at the waist. On Leila, it looked like elegance trying to hard and failing. She moved quickly, hoping to vanish into the shadows before the whispers grew louder, but they found her anyway. "Oh my God," a voice rang out, sharp and sweet like a poison-dipped strawberry. Vanessa Drayton. Leila's chest tensed as the crowd around the open bar shifted. Vanessa stood there, a perfect vision in scarlet, flanked by two identically sculpted women with champagne flutes in hand. Her blonde hair was curled into old Hollywood waves, and her smile was a dagger wrapped in velvet. "Someone call security," Vanessa said, stepping forward dramatically. "I think one of the flower girls got lost in the wardrobe department." Soft laughter rippled around them. Leila froze beside the center pedestal, placing the flowers down slowly, deliberately. She straightened, trying not to let her voice tremble. "I was just fixing the decor." Vanessa's tone was dripping with mock concern. "How noble. And that dress, it's almost convincing. Isn't it, girls? Just a little too borrowed." She took a slow, taunting sip of her drink. "Next time try not to wear the tag." Laughter now, real, unfiltered, echoing off the marble. Leila's cheeks burned. Her hands clenched at her sides. She tried to back away, but her feet wouldn't move. She didn't belong here, not in this world of curated perfection. Not in front of these people who devoured insecurity like dessert. Then the music stopped. Not faded, not softened. It stopped abrupt, clean, like someone had yanked the life out of the room. And the silence that followed was heavier than the music had ever been. Everyone. A deep voice spoke, calm and commanding. "Meet my wife, Leila." Turn. Lucas Alden stood at the top of the short staircase that led into the ballroom, his tall frame dressed in a classic black tuxedo that looked like it had been cut from shadows. His expression was unreadable, those gray eyes like storm clouds waiting to break. His hair fell just imperfect enough to look intentional. And his presence, dear God, his presence was a force that pulled every breath in the room toward him. He stepped forward, closing the distance with an ease that felt both intimate and terrifying. Without hesitation, he placed a hand on Leila's lower back, anchoring her to him like she was something he'd been looking for all night. "My wife," he repeated, louder this time. "Leila Alden." Gasps fluttered like moths. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed again, a flicker of confusion breaking through her carefully constructed poise. Leila couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her skin burned where his hand rested, his palm warm through the silk of her borrowed dress. She tilted her face up to look at him, heart pounding, lips parting with the beginnings of a question. "Lucas." Alden didn't blink. "Play something romantic," he told the musicians, still not looking away. And just like that, the quartet obeyed. Music rose again, hesitant, dreamlike. The crowd didn't laugh now. They stared, and Leila, just a florist, just a girl in the wrong dress, stood beside the richest man in the room, wondering how everything had changed in a single breath. The marble floor beneath Leila's feet felt like ice, even through her heels. Her fingers twitched at her sides. unsure whether to hold onto Lucas Alden's tuxedo sleeve or run straight out of the Rosenthal estate. The music swelled again, soft and slow, like nothing unusual had happened, as if the most powerful man in the room hadn't just claimed a florist as his wife in front of half of Manhattan's elite. But every eye still watched them, every whispered breath seemed to wrap around Layla's throat. Lucas's hand remained firm at her back, guiding her not toward the exit, but deeper into the ballroom. What are you doing?" she hissed beneath, her breath, her lips barely moving as she leaned toward him. "Rescuing you," he said smoothly, not even glancing at her. "And maybe myself." They passed Vanessa Drayton, whose expression had curdled into something poisonous beneath the glow of the chandelier. The muscles in her perfect jaw twitched. She took a step forward, but Lucas met her gaze like a wall of glass gold, clear, impenetrable. She stopped mid-step. "Lovely evening, Vanessa," Lucas said with a smile so sharp it could have sliced silk. "But I believe you're mistaken. This woman isn't playing dress-up. She's playing the part she was born for." Layla's knees nearly buckled. Lucas led her to a corner near the grand piano, a quiet pocket behind velvet drapes where shadows danced across marble and no one could overhear. Once they were there, he finally let go. The warmth of his hand faded instantly from her back, leaving goosebumps in its place. "Explain." "Now," Layla demanded, her voice low and shaking. "What the hell was that?" Lucas turned toward her fully for the first time, and Layla realized just how tall he was. How intense. Up close, his steel gray eyes were almost unreadable, stormy, haunted, calculating. "Do you want the polite version or the honest one?" he asked. "I want the version that makes this nightmare make sense." He paused, watching her. "Fine. The honest one." Lucas glanced out toward the crowd, then back at her. "I was supposed to announce an engagement tonight. Vanessa and our families have been negotiating a merger, one built on money, power, legacy, not love." "Never love," Layla blinked. "And you didn't want to go through with it? Not in this lifetime." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But I also didn't want to spark a scandal until I saw you." Layla's voice cracked. "I'm just a florist. I don't even belong here." "Exactly," Lucas said. "You didn't come looking for attention, and yet you had it. Even Vanessa couldn't ignore you. I knew if I claimed you, if I said you were mine, no one would question it. Not here, not tonight. They'd be too busy trying to figure out how I kept it a secret." Layla stared at him, her thoughts spinning like leaves in a windstorm. "So you used me?" He nodded. "Yes, and what now?" She folded her arms, trying to hide how her hands trembled. "You just expect me to play along in some fake love story for your convenience?" Lucas looked at her carefully. "No, I expect you to make a choice." "A choice?" she repeated, her voice like ice. "Come with me," he said before she could protest. Lucas was already moving again, weaving them through the sea of guests until they slipped out through a back corridor, the noise of the party fading behind them. They reached a private lounge, intimate, dimly lit, with a view of the city skyline beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. The world below looked distant and unreal, like a painting behind glass. He motioned for her to sit, but she remained standing. Lucas poured two drinks from a side table, something expensive and amber. He didn't offer the glass yet. "Layla Torres," he said, finally saying her name. "I know who you are." Her stomach sank. "What?" "I know your shop on 12th Street. I've walked past it for months. I've seen you delivering bouquets in the rain, carrying crates too heavy for one person, walking home at night with shoes that look like they've been through war." Layla's breath caught in her throat. "I knew who you were before tonight," Lucas said quietly. "I just didn't know how much I needed you until I saw you stand your ground in front of people who would have broken anyone else." She was silent, stunned. He continued, "I don't want a trophy wife. I don't need another polished doll. But I do need to make the world believe I've settled down, to keep the board in check, to keep the press distracted, and to keep Vanessa out of my business personally and professionally." He held out the glass. "You want me to pretend to be your wife for 1 year?" he confirmed. "You'll live in my penthouse, appear at events, smile for the cameras, and in return, I'll pay you generously enough to pay off your brother's medical treatments and keep your shop running for the next 10 years. Layla felt the room tilt. This is insane, she whispered. Lucas finally smiled, not smug. Something more vulnerable, it is. But so is surviving in a city that treats people like you as background noise. And yet you've done it with grace. She stared at the glass in his hand. A single choice. Say yes, and her entire life could change. Say no, and walk away from a fantasy built on lies, but paved with opportunity. Outside, the city sparkled like a promise. And somewhere deep inside, something whispered, you weren't made for silence forever. Layla reached for the glass. Her fingers brushed his. 1 year, she said. Lucas nodded once. And no falling in love. Layla's lips curled, but it wasn't quite a smile. Deal. Neither of them saw the figure in red watching from the shadows behind the curtain. Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she turned away, her fingers curling into fists. The game had begun. And she wasn't about to lose. The penthouse was quiet, too quiet. Silence echoed against the high ceilings and glass walls like a secret waiting to be shouted. Layla stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city glitter beneath her like a sea of stars. She wore a silk robe the color of champagne, one she'd found folded on the bed after Lucas's driver dropped her off, with nothing but a garment bag, a non-disclosure contract, and a handwritten note that read, "Make yourself at home. We begin tomorrow." She hadn't slept. The guest room, if one could call a room with a chandelier, to balconies, and its own fireplace, a guest room felt more like a movie set than a bedroom. The pillows were too soft, the sheets too smooth. Everything smelled of money and distance. No warmth, no life, and certainly no space for a florist who once grew marigolds in coffee cans on her apartment fire. Escape. Layla felt like an actress in a play she hadn't auditioned for, only the script hadn't been handed to her yet. Just then, the door clicked open. Lucas entered, not in a tuxedo this time, but in a crisp charcoal shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows and dark slacks. Casual, but with that same restrained elegance that made him impossible to ignore. He stopped when he saw her, and for a moment, he looked like he didn't know what to say either. "You're awake," he said finally. "I've been awake since you handed me a glass of bribe whiskey," she replied, her voice sharper than she meant it to be. "What now, Mr. Alden? Do I get my lesson in how to walk like I belong on your arm?" He smiled faintly. "That's coming later. For now, I just need you to sit through breakfast with my legal team." Her eyebrows shot up. "Your legal team?" He nodded. "Contracts. We need to draw boundaries. Financial clauses. Rules for public behavior. Photographs, statements, sleeping arrangements. When and how the fake marriage ends. Protections for both sides." Layla let out a bitter laugh. "How romantic." Lucas walked toward her, slowly, deliberately. "This isn't about romance. It's about survival." She didn't move as he came close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline. "For who?" she asked. "For both of us," he said quietly. The conference room in Lucas's home office looked more like a war room than a place for breakfast. Sleek black chairs surrounded a polished obsidian table. 3 people sat on one side, his lawyers. Layla sat across from them, hands clasped in her lap. Lucas stood at the head of the table. Ms. Torres, one of the lawyers, began, a tall woman with silver hair and hawk-like eyes. "This is a standard marital agreement with some adjustments. Your compensation will be dispersed monthly, untaxed, via private accounts. Your brother's medical costs will be handled through a shell donation fund to maintain discretion. A trust will be formed for your business aspiration, though access is conditional on the completion of the 1-year term." Layla blinked. "I haven't even signed yet, and you're talking about trusts and shells. You agreed in principle," Lucas said, folding his arms. "Now we're giving that principle legal bones. And what happens if one of us breaks a rule?" she asked. The silver-haired lawyer's gaze didn't waver. "Breach results in automatic contract termination and forfeiture of funds and love," Layla asked suddenly, turning to Lucas. "What if I break the no-love clause?" That silenced the room. Lucas single quotes S jaw tensed. "Then we'll renegotiate the terms with a different kind of lawyer, I assume," she muttered. The contract was signed in quiet tension. That afternoon, a tailor, a stylist, and a private etiquette instructor arrived like soldiers to prep Layla for war. It was exhausting. She tried on 10 dresses in 2 hours, learned how to exit a luxury car with dignity, practiced sipping champagne without blinking, smiled until her cheeks hurt. Lucas watched from the hallway sometimes, saying nothing, judging everything. But there was one moment when their eyes met. She was wearing a dark emerald gown, her hair pinned up, lips a shade deeper than usual. He looked at her for a long beat, then turned away without a word. That night, she found a letter, slipped under her door. You look like you belong today. Not to them, not to the cameras, to yourself. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. 3 days later, their first public appearance, the museum gala, was a press-heavy, politically charged event, and Lucas Alden walking in with a mystery wife was enough to send the media into frenzy. Layla wore a silver dress that caught the light like moonlight on water. Lucas's hand at her back was both shield and signal. She is with me. She is untouchable. But then came the whisper. Did you hear? A woman said, not realizing Layla was inches away. He found her in a flower shop. Can you imagine? Like some tragic fairy tale where the prince marries the help. Layla stiffened. Lucas's grip on her waist tightened. Let them talk. He whispered at her ear. But she couldn't. The shame flooded her like acid. After dinner, she slipped out onto the museum balcony for air. The city was loud beneath her. She hated this world, its sharp edges, its painted smiles. Cold out here, Lucas said behind her. I thought you were inside charming the elite. You left. She turned to face him. They think I'm a joke. They fear what they can't label. I'm not a label, Lucas. I'm not some blank canvas you can dress and parade until your board is happy. I know. He said quietly. That's why I chose you. She paused. No. You chose me because I was inconvenient enough to disrupt your plans and quiet enough to control. He didn't respond, but there was something behind his eyes, something that made her chest ache. Regret, maybe, or fear. Then, suddenly, there was a flash. Paparazzi. Somehow, one had gotten close. Damn it, Lucas muttered, stepping in front of her. Another flash. Then a voice called out, Mr. Alden, Ms. Torres, is it true your marriage is fake? Lucas turned, his hand tightening around hers. You want the truth? He called out. Here it is. Every second with her feels more real than every relationship I've ever had. Click, click, flash. And then he pulled her close to close and kissed her. Not a staged kiss, not a posed one, a real one. Her heart stuttered, her hands trembled. It was supposed to be fake, but something in that moment told Layla that the contract meant nothing anymore. Not when the richest man in the room looked at her like she was the only thing that could ruin him or save him. The kiss was supposed to be strategic, a calculated move to silence the press, redirect attention, and buy them a few more weeks of media control. But the moment Lucas Alden's lips met Layla's, time seemed to rupture. It wasn't tender. It wasn't hesitant. It was real. Like a fuse had been waiting to be lit from the moment he said, "Meet my wife." And now the entire city was watching. It burned. When he finally pulled away, her breath caught in her throat. Not because of the crowd, not because of the cameras still flashing somewhere behind them, but because Lucas wasn't looking at her like she was a prop anymore. He looked wrecked, like he had just crossed a line he wasn't sure how to return from, and that terrified her. Neither of them spoke as security ushered them inside. Layla could still feel the imprint of his mouth on hers, the phantom sensation of his hand at the back of her neck, the way his fingers had curled slightly, like he didn't want to let go. But now they were back in the public eye, sitting side by side in a black SUV as it pulled away from the museum. The silence between them was thickened, electric. Lucas stared out the window, his profile cut from shadow and regret. Layla folded her hands in her lap and stared down at them like they might explain what had just happened. That wasn't in the contract, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, he said. So why did you do it? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. On the screen were already dozens of headlines, populating in real time. Billionaire Lucas Alden kisses mystery wife under museum stars. The flower girl who stunned Manhattan. Fake marriage. New footage may prove otherwise. He put the phone away. Because people would have kept digging, and I needed them to believe it. Did you? She asked, turning to him. Because it didn't feel like you were performing. Lucas's jaw clenched. Maybe I forgot how to fake it. The air shifted again, heavier now, when they arrived at the penthouse. Layla stepped out of the car first. Lucas followed, slower this time, like he was carrying something he couldn't quite explain. They rode the elevator up in silence, standing apart, the echo of that kiss still hanging between them like smoke in a sealed room. But when the elevator doors opened, everything changed. The penthouse lights were on. The staff had already gone home, but someone had been there, on the marble island in the kitchen sat an envelope. Black, unmarked, thick. Lucas moved toward it cautiously. Layla stood at the edge of the hallway, her heart thudding. He opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Layla, smiling, laughing, months ago, outside her flower shop. Lucas turned it over. Does she know who you really are? Layla saw his face pale. What is it? She asked, stepping forward. He shoved the photo into his jacket pocket. Nothing. Just someone trying to rattle me. But Layla wasn't a fool. The fear in his eyes hadn't been about the picture. It had been about what came with it. Lucas, she said slowly, who sent that? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked into his study and closed the door. Behind him, Layla stared at the door for a long time before turning away. In the days that followed, something shifted between them. Lucas became more distant, not cruel, just unreachable. Like a man trying to hold a secret inside his ribs and pretend it wasn't breaking him. Layla kept her distance, choosing to focus on her shop, her brother, anything but the ache in her chest. Yet, even in his distance, Lucas never let her fall. He still walked her to events, still placed a hand at the small of her back when cameras were near, still made sure the car was warm when she stepped inside, and that the staff had stocked the penthouse with her favorite tea. But he never spoke about the photo, and every night, he locked his study door, until one night, she picked the lock. The study was dark except for the blue light of his laptop screen. Lucas wasn't there, but his desk was a mess of folders and files, none labeled with business logos. They were personal. She opened the top one. Inside was a dossier. Layla tore her childhood address, her hospital records, photos from her teenage years, surveillance images, phone logs, security reports. Layla's stomach twisted. He'd had her investigated. Before the gala, before the kiss, before she ever knew his name. What are you doing? His voice behind her was like ice down her spine. She spun around, face pale, hands trembling. You had me watched. Lucas didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. Why? She asked. What were you looking for? He stepped into the room and closed the door. I needed to know who you were. If you could handle this, if you were real. And what did you find? Her voice broke. That I was good enough to use as a shield. No, he said quietly. I found someone who reminded me of everything I lost. Layla blinked. Lucas crossed to the bookshelf, pulled out an old hardcover, and from inside its pages, slipped out a photograph. It was worn, creased. His mother, young, smiling, arms covered in flower petals, standing in front of a modest bouquet shop that looked eerily like Layla's. My mother was a florist too, he said. She died when I was 17. My father buried her memory beneath money and concrete, and I forgot what she looked like when she laughed. Layla stepped closer, the pain in her chest no longer anger but something deeper. So you saw me and thought, what, that you could rewrite history? I saw you, he whispered, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a machine. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't the kind that pushed them apart. It was the kind that begged to be broken by truth. So what are we really doing, Lucas? Layla asked. He looked up at her, eyes raw and unguarded, pretending, until it stops feeling like pretend. And for the first time, Layla wondered if she wanted to keep pretending at all or if she already didn't know. Where the act ended and her heart began, Askchad rain came without warning that night, sweeping across the glass windows of the penthouse like a furious tide. It hammered against the world outside, a relentless rhythm that seemed to match the storm inside Layla's chest. She stood in the kitchen barefoot, staring at the boiling kettle, her thoughts 1,000 miles away from the warmth of the steam. Lucas hadn't come home. He'd left that morning for a meeting with the board, and 12 hours later, still no word. Not a text, not a call, not even a message relayed through his assistant. Not that they were supposed to care. It was a contract, after all, a performance. One she'd agreed to. But after what happened in the study, after seeing the photo of his mother, hearing his voice crack with memory, watching his mask slip for just a second, Layla wasn't sure who they were pretending for anymore. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single message. Go to room 23 at the Wolcott Hotel. Come alone. He's not who you think. Her fingers curled around the phone, heart thudding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She stared at the screen, the words repeating like a pulse. Come alone. She should delete it. Forget it. Wait for Lucas to come home and explain himself. But another message followed. If you want the truth, you have to stop waiting for him to give it to you. She closed her eyes, then grabbed her coat. The Wolcott Hotel wasn't the kind of place you found on a billionaire's itinerary. It was old, worn at the edges, with an elevator that groaned like it had secrets of its own. The halls were dimly lit, the carpet faded. Room 23 was near the end of the corridor. She hesitated before knocking. The door opened before she could touch it. Inside stood a woman, tall, elegant, her black hair twisted into a severe bun. She looked familiar, though Layla couldn't place her face immediately. You came, the woman said, her voice clipped and British. Who are you? Layla asked, stepping into the room slowly. The woman closed the door behind her. My name is Betrayal Vance. I used to work for the Alden family, before your husband destroyed everything. Layla's spine straightened. Lucas hasn't destroyed anything. Betrayal smiled without warmth. Hasn't he? Did he tell you how his mother died? Layla felt her breath catch. Cancer, she whispered. He said it was cancer. Betrayal shook her head. That's what the press was told. The truth is she took her own life after Lucas's father had her institutionalized. And Lucas did nothing. He was 17, and he disappeared into boarding school and never looked back. He inherited the company, the penthouse, the power, and left his mother's grave unmarked for 10 years. Layla's stomach turned. That's not possible, she said, though her voice trembled. You think he's rescuing you? Betrayal stepped closer, her eyes sharp and unrelenting. You're just the next symbol, a stand-in for guilt he'll never admit. Do you even know what happened to the last woman who fell in love with him? Layla didn't answer. Betrayal dropped a file onto the small table. Photographs spilled out. A woman with dark hair, smiling, then hospital records, an obituary. She was his fiancée. 2 years ago, found dead in their lake house. Accidental overdose, no charges filed, but questions remained. Layla stared at the file, her throat closing. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because you deserve to know what you've signed up for. Betrayal walked to the door. You want to believe he's broken and beautiful, but sometimes broken people break others just to feel whole again. Layla didn't sleep that night. She returned to the penthouse in silence, the rain still falling, the city still unaware that her world had shifted. Lucas wasn't home when she arrived, or maybe he was avoiding her. Either way, the silence between them had never felt more dangerous. The next morning, the headlines erupted. Lucas Alden's fake wife? Insiders reveal secret background check. Mystery woman's contract exposed. Exclusive. Former Alden employee says she's just another casualty. The story spread like fire. Lucas didn't speak to the press, didn't issue a statement. He came home that night, eyes shadowed, tie loosened, exhaustion in every line of his body. Layla met him at the door, holding the file in her hands. Tell me it's not true, she said. He looked at the photos, at her, then closed the door behind him. Some of it is, he said. Some of it isn't. Did your mother really? Yes, he said softly. She did. Layla felt the floor drop beneath her. And the woman your fiancée, Amelia. His voice cracked. We were together for 3 years. She struggled with depression. I didn't see how bad it had gotten until it was too late. I found her myself. I called the ambulance. I gave the statement. But the press never lets go. And me, she whispered. Am I just the next Amelia? Lucas's face broke open. Not with anger, not with defensiveness, with grief. "You were never supposed to be more than a headline," he said. "But then you laughed at my joke, and you brought wildflowers into a ballroom that only knew roses. And you made this place feel like a home." Layla's voice trembled. "Then why lie?" "Because I didn't know if I was capable of protecting someone again," he said. "And I didn't know if I was allowed to fall in love with someone who reminded me of everything I failed." Double quotes silence. Then Layla stepped forward. "So fall," she said. "But don't expect me to catch you unless you start telling the truth." Lucas nodded slowly. "Then here's the truth. I'm not afraid of losing the company, or the press, or even my name. I'm afraid of losing you." She looked up at him, everything in her aching. "Then stop trying to own me," she said, "and start choosing me." He reached for her hand, and for the first time, he didn't look like the richest man in the room. He looked like a man with nothing until she chose to stay. The next morning, the world outside continued to spin, but inside Lucas Alden's penthouse, time felt warped, stretched to thin in some places, impossibly heavy in others. Sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden bands across the hardwood floors, but it did nothing to warm the chill between them. Layla stood at the edge of the kitchen island, a coffee mug in her hands she hadn't sipped from. Lucas sat at the far end of the room, scrolling through news reports that reeked of betrayal. They had been exposed, the contract, the arrangement, the lie that had become tangled in truth to untangle without bleeding. The media now knew. Someone had leaked every detail. Layla didn't need to guess who. "Brielle Vance," she said, her voice flat. "She warned me, but I didn't realize she'd go this far." Lucas didn't look up. "I knew she still had connections. I didn't know she still had venom." "She said I'd end up like Amelia," Layla whispered. "She said you'd break me." His head snapped up. The pain in his eyes was sharp and sudden. "I would never hurt you like that." "Not on purpose," she replied. "But damage doesn't care if it's intentional. Neither does trust." Lucas stood slowly. "You think I haven't been punishing myself every day since Amelia died? I know what I let happen. And that's why I tried so hard to keep you at a distance." "Then why pull me in so close?" Layla asked. "Why kiss me like it was real? Why look at me like I matter?" Lucas crossed the room, stopping just short of touching her. "Because you do. Because you've mattered since the second you refused to flinch when Vanessa tried to humiliate you in front of that ballroom. Because you walk through fire and still smell like wildflowers." Layla's voice cracked. "Then why did you investigate me? Why did you keep files on me like I was a threat instead of a person?" "Because I was scared." He exhaled. "Because you didn't fit into any part of my world, and I didn't know what to do with that." Layla stared at him for a long, aching moment. "You should have let me in." Before Lucas could reply, his assistant James burst into the room, face pale, phone in hand. "Sir, you need to see this." He turned the phone toward Lucas. It was a video. Grainy, handheld, clearly taken in secret. Lucas, weeks ago, in a boardroom. Voice sharp, saying the words, "She's convenient, disposable. She won't last longer than a quarter. Just enough to kill the merger." Layla froze. Lucas's face drained of color. "That's fake." He said immediately, "It's edited, spliced." Layla backed away. "Is it?" "Layla, you have to believe me, do I?" She snapped. "Because everything else has been a half-truth wrapped in soft words and expensive suits. How do I know this isn't who you really are?" Lucas took a step toward her, but she turned. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't chase me with apologies after dragging me into this war." She walked out. The door closed behind her with a sound like finality. The next 72 hours were chaos. Headlines spiraled. Lucas Alden caught on tape. Was it ever real? Layla Torres flees penthouse. Sources say contract marriage implodes. Vanessa Drayton expected to reclaim engagement plans. Layla disappeared from public view. No one knew where she went. Lucas canceled all meetings. The board called emergency votes. His company's shares dipped, and murmurs began swirling about him being replaced. But none of that mattered to him. What mattered was the silence in the penthouse. The way her tea cabinet remained untouched. The way the piano keys she used to tap as she passed by stayed still. The ghost of her smile haunted every corridor. He went to the flower shop. It was closed, He tried calling. No answer. He went to her brother's school. Samuel was fine, but Layla hadn't come home. Then, on the fourth day, a package arrived at his office. Inside was a copy of the contract, unsigned, and a single pressed marigold. No note. Just that. The flower of despair and resilience. Lucas stared at it for hours. Then he stood, walked to the window, and made a decision that would change everything. The press gathered in front of the historic Weston Hall, expecting a shareholder's address or resignation. Instead, Lucas walked on stage, no tie, sleeves rolled, a bouquet of marigolds in one hand and a mic in the other. "I won't waste your time," he said. "You want a scandal? I'll give you the truth." The crowd leaned forward. "Yes, our marriage started as a contract. Yes, I used Layla to shield myself from a merger I didn't want. But something happened. I fell in love with the woman I never planned to see again after the gala. I fell for the way she speaks to children like they're art, for the way she refuses to let cruelty define her, for the way she made me want to earn back the humanity I had buried under billions. Silence. I don't care if you fire me, or if Vanessa takes the stage after me to claim victory. But if Layla Torres is out there, I want her to know something." He looked directly at the cameras. "You were never disposable. You were the only thing that made me real." He dropped the mic and the bouquet. Layla didn't see it live. She was in a quiet corner of the public library, hiding beneath a borrowed hoodie, flipping through old poetry books, trying to remember what she'd loved before all this began. But someone tapped her shoulder. A teenage girl, wide-eyed. "You're her," she whispered. "The flower girl. He said he loved you. The richest man in the world." Layla's heart cracked open. She ran. Lucas was still standing outside the hall when the town car pulled up beside the curb. She stepped out, hair wind-blown, face bare, eyes full of fire. "You said you fell in love," she said. He turned. "I meant it." "Good," she said, marching straight up to him, her voice trembling. "Because now it's my turn to decide if I want to fall back." He held out his hand. "Not assuming. Then choose me." Layla looked down at his fingers, at the crowd gathering, at the flash of cameras. Then she took his hand, not for show, not for the board, not for the world, but for them. And the world, for once, stopped watching and started believing. The morning after Layla took Lucas's hand in front of the world, the city pulsed with a new kind of electricity. News channels, social feeds, and magazine headlines all echoed the same stunned refrain. Layla Torres chooses Lucas Alden. Was it love all along, the richest man in the room, and the woman who made him walk away from it all? From contract to commitment, is the Cinderella story real? But behind the headlines and flashbulbs, something darker began to stir. The board wasn't happy. Not just because Lucas had risked his reputation, not because he'd aired the company's secrets in front of the press, but because he had pulled back from a billion-dollar merger with Vanessa Drayton's family, one that was already being counted in political favors and offshore accounts. And Vanessa wasn't done. She watched the live broadcast from a private suite at the Marlowe Club, lips pressed into a line so tight it looked carved in glass. Beside her, Brielle Vance swirled a flute of champagne she hadn't sipped. "You were right," Vanessa said. "Venom wrapped in velvet. She's not like the others. She doesn't care about money." "No," Brielle agreed. "She cares about meaning, which makes her dangerous. Then we make her irrelevant." Vanessa replied coldly. "And this time, we don't use words. We use proof." A week passed. Lucas resigned from the Alden Foundation, stepping down from the legacy he once protected like a fortress in a shocking move. He divested shares and walked away from several international holdings. It wasn't just about rebellion anymore. It was about starting something of his own, something real, something honest. "Are you sure?" Layla had asked him one night, as they stood on the balcony of a modest apartment he'd just purchased. Under her name. "You don't have to give up everything for me." Lucas cupped her cheek gently. "I'm not giving it up for you. I'm giving it up because of you. Because you made me see what it was costing me." "What was that?" she whispered. "My soul." Their nights became slower, quieter, filled with art supplies and laughter, and dinners cooked with burnt edges and clumsy joy. They were building something raw and imperfect, something that felt like Life, until the invitation arrived. It was wrapped in ivory vellum and sealed in red wax. The front read only, "You're invited to the rebirth of the Drayton legacy, one night only." Lucas opened it and laughed under his breath. "Vanessa's throwing a masquerade gala," he said. "Looks like she's trying to win back the city." "Should we go?" Layla asked. "We shouldn't," he replied, "but we will." The Drayton masquerade was held in a sprawling Gothic mansion just outside the city. The press wasn't invited, but that didn't matter. Everyone who mattered would be there. Hedge fund kings, oil heirs, scandal-ridden senators, and in the middle of it all Vanessa Drayton, dressed in black feathers and a smile that said, "Watch me rise from the ashes." Layla walked in beside Lucas, wearing a silver mask and a midnight blue gown that shimmered like moonlight on water. Her presence sent ripples through the crowd. People whispered, but none dared approach her. Not until Vanessa glided over, a flute of champagne in one hand and a smirk in the other. "Darling," she said to Layla, "you look improved, and you look like a swan that lost a fight with a chandelier." Layla replied, her voice calm. "Elegant." Lucas choked on a laugh. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, but she recovered quickly. "I'm hosting a very special unveiling tonight. I do hope you'll stay." "We wouldn't miss it," Lucas said coolly. But as the night deepened, something shifted. Lucas stepped away for a brief meeting with an old contact, leaving Layla alone in the gallery hallway. That's when Brielle appeared dressed in shadow, her face half hidden behind a raven mask. "You're glowing," she said. "I suppose betrayal flatters you." Layla didn't flinch. "You're still clinging to a ghost." Lucas moved on. "You should too." "Is that what he told you?" Brielle said, stepping closer. "Then I suppose you should see what's in the West Wing." "What's in there?" "The truth." Layla followed the corridor. Everything about the West Wing felt colder, older. Portraits lined the walls. The whispers of music faded behind her. And then she saw the door, slightly ajar. Inside, a projection screen glowed. A video playing. Lucas, in his early 20s, seated beside an older man with cruel eyes. His father. They were discussing numbers, strategies. But then it shifted. Layla's face appeared on the screen. Years ago, working in her flower shop. Lucas's father leaned toward him in the video. "She's perfect," he said. "Humble, sweet. She'll make a perfect decoy if we need to distract the press. We'll call it love. The public adores a Cinderella story." Lucas didn't respond. He didn't object. He just nodded. Layla stepped back from the screen as if it had slapped her. The door behind her creaked. "Vanessa sent that to me weeks ago," Brielle said from the doorway. "You should have known. You were never chosen. You were designed." Layla fled. She burst out into the ballroom, heart racing, vision blurring. Lucas saw her, cross the room. But she backed away. "Layla, what happened?" "How long?" she choked. "How long were you watching me before we ever met?" Lucas paled. "That was years ago. Before I knew you. Before I knew anything. But you did know. And you let it happen. I didn't choose you because of him," he said, desperate now. "I stayed because of you." But Layla was already stepping back, mask trembling in her fingers. "I believed you," she whispered. "I believed this was real." And before he could reach her, before the crowd could see her tears, she vanished into the night. Not as the wife of the richest man in the room, but as the woman who had just lost everything real she thought she'd found. The cold air outside the Drayton estate hit Layla like a slap, sharp, sobering, and merciless. She ran across the gravel drive, heels clicking against stone as she tore the mask from her face. The night swallowed her. The noise of music and laughter behind her faded, replaced by the deafening silence of betrayal echoing in her ribs. She didn't wait for a car. She didn't call Lucas. She just ran. Through the iron gates, past the long hedges, out onto the empty road where city lights shimmered in the far-off distance like promises that never came true. What hurt wasn't that Lucas had once seen her as convenient. What shattered her was that he hadn't told her. He'd looked her in the eye, held her in his arms, kissed her with a kind of desperation that felt holy, and all the while, a piece of him had known she wasn't a coincidence. She was a contingency plan. Lucas burst through the West Wing seconds after she'd fled. The room was empty. The screen still glowed. flickering. His younger self. His father, those god-awful words. The expression on his own face stone, numb, passive. He wanted to punch the ghost in the screen. She saw it. He asked. Brielle leaned against the doorframe, her raven mask hanging at her side. She saw. Everything. Lucas's voice was low and deadly. You've made your move. Now get out of my sight. But Brielle only tilted her head, her lips curving into something bitter. You think you're different from your father, but you're not. You use people too. You just do it with flowers and softer words. Lucas walked toward her with a calmness that frightened. I am nothing like him, aren't you? She asked. Layla wasn't collateral in a merger, Lucas. She was your salvation. And you still let your past decide her worth. She turned and walked away, leaving the scent of rose water and ash behind. Lucas didn't go after her. He ran out the doors, into the cold, ignoring the cameras, the whispers, the curious faces. But by the time his car reached the city, she was gone. Layla didn't go home. Not to the penthouse, not to her brother's apartment. Instead, she went to the only place that had never lied to her. Her shop. Closed, dark, quiet. She unlocked the door with shaking hands, stepped inside, and locked it again behind her. The familiar scent of soil and eucalyptus wrapped around her like a blanket. She dropped the heels, pulled the pins from her hair, sat on the floor between the pots of rosemary and wild orchids, and wept. She wept for the girl who had once believed love could be built from lies, for the woman who had dared to hope, and for the man who had made her feel like home. Then reminded her that even homes can collapse if the foundation is rotten. The next day, the media went rabid. Rumors spread like wildfire. Layla Torres flees gala after leaked footage surfaces. Was the entire relationship engineered from the start? Lucas Alden, Cinderella's prince or her puppeteer? Lucas stayed silent. For once, the man who always knew what to say, who could silence boardrooms and break mergers with a word, had none. Instead, he drove to the flower shop every morning, sat outside in his car, watched the lights go on at sunrise, watched them go off at night. But she never came to the door, never opened the blinds, never sent a message. It was the first time she had truly shut him out, and he deserved it. On the fifth day, a letter arrived at the penthouse. No envelope, no name, just a small folded piece of parchment tied with twine, placed beneath the brass lion head knocker on the door. Lucas opened it with trembling fingers. You broke the contract, but worse, you broke the truth. I don't want your empire. I don't need your legacy. I needed the one thing I thought you couldn't fake. You looked at me like I mattered. Now I don't know if that was real either. Stop sending drivers. Stop waiting outside. If you ever loved me, let me be free of you. Lucas stared at the letter for a long time. Then, without warning, he threw it into the fireplace. And made a decision. Not to chase her. Not with money. Not with press releases. But with the one thing he hadn't yet risked: truth. That evening, Layla stepped into her shop and froze. The lights were off, but someone had been inside. Not a thief. There was no mess, no broken glass. Only her flowers. Hundreds of them. Scattered across the floor, cascading from the ceiling, tucked into every crevice of her small, humble space. Not roses, not orchids, not exotic imports. Wildflowers. Every single one. Daffodils for new beginnings, marigolds for grief and strength, lavender for healing, forget-me-nots, sunflowers, tiny violets, Queen Anne's lace. And in the center of the shop, beneath a suspended crown of daisies, sat a single wooden box. Inside it, a letter, written by hand. Signed. Dear Layla, you were never a plan, not for the board, not for the press, and not for my father. You were the curve in the road that made me crash and thank the wreckage. I didn't fall in love with you because you were convenient. I fell in love with you because you were impossible, because you looked at my empty life and made room for your wild color. I see you now. I see what I risked losing, and if you need space, I will give it. If you need silence, I will stay quiet. But if you ever want to be seen, really seen, I will be waiting. Not at the penthouse, not in a boardroom, but at the place you first reminded me I was still human. The bench near 14th and Asher, where the old fountain sings and pigeons argue over breadcrumbs. I'll wait there every Saturday. Same time, for 1 year, even if you never come. Because you were the only thing I ever chose for the right reason. And love, real love, doesn't run. It roots and waits. Lucas. Layla sank to the floor. The flowers pressed around her like a heartbeat. And for the first time in days, she let herself feel it. Not the betrayal, not the fear, but the ache of something still alive. Something that despite everything might still find its way home. The days passed slowly, like a clock being dragged through molasses. Saturdays came and went. And each time, Layla Torres sat inside her flower shop with her hands folded tightly in her lap, staring at the clock on the wall. 3:15 p.m. the time he said he'd be there. Waiting, always waiting. She never went, not once. But every Sunday morning, a customer would come in quietly, hand her a folded note and a single flower, always wild, always carefully chosen, always from Lucas. He never begged. Never demanded. He just wrote about pigeons fighting over breadcrumbs, about how the sunlight glinted off the old bronze fountain, about the children who played tag between the benches, and how each time one of them laughed, he turned, hoping it was her voice. And with each letter, Layla broke a little more. Not because she missed him, but because he was finally becoming the man she had once believed he could be after she'd already left. Meanwhile, the rest of the city had moved on. The Drayton merger was formally declared dead. Investors pulled out. Vanessa's family issued a vague press statement blaming ethical misalignment and personal entanglements. Vanessa herself disappeared from the spotlight for weeks until a video leaked. A hidden recording, grainy audio, a voice unmistakably hers, laughing with Brielle in the back of a limousine. If I can't have Lucas, I'll burn what's left of him to the ground. Wait until she finds out the real reason he picked her. That part never made it into the fairy tale. The public backlash was immediate. The social media tide turned. And for the first time, Layla Torres was no longer a mystery, or a fraud, or a pawn. She was a survivor. But she didn't care. Not about the news, not about the press. She cared only about one thing, the final truth Vanessa hinted at. The real reason he picked her. Had Lucas held something back still? And if so, could she forgive him again? One stormy afternoon, as clouds bruised the sky and thunder rolled above the skyline, Layla finally returned to the Alden penthouse. Not to see Lucas. But to confront the past. She used the spare code. It hadn't been changed. Everything inside was exactly as she remembered and touched, like a museum of another life. Except for one thing. His study door was unlocked. Inside, she found boxes stacked against the wall, files labeled by date, folder, tabs scribbled in his handwriting. She rifled through them until she found what she was looking for. A folder marked Project Belladonna. She opened it. And her breath left her body. Photographs of her flower shop, before he ever approached her, transcripts of conversations, customer profiles, even schematics of the sidewalk layout. Why? Why had Lucas been gathering this before they ever met? Then she found it. A single, creased letter from his mother Lucinda. Alden, dated 1 year before her death. If anything ever happens to me, and you find yourself lost, go back to something simple. Something real. Go back to where you last felt peace. Remember the shop. The one with the yellow awning on Asher Street. The woman there gave me lavender tea once when I was crying outside in the rain. She didn't ask questions, she just gave kindness. I never forgot her. Layla stared at the note. The flower shop. Her mother. Lucas single quotes S mother. They had crossed paths once, long ago. And Lucas had remembered. Not as strategy. But as sanctuary. He hadn't picked her because she was convenient. He had found her because his mother had once been saved by the same quiet kindness Layla had always given freely. And he had gone looking for it again desperately. Brokenly, she covered her mouth, tears pooling in her eyes. He hadn't used her. He had been trying to find his way back to the part of the world that wasn't hollow, and somehow, that part had always been her. The next Saturday, 3:15 p.m. Lucas sat on the cold iron bench beside the fountain. No bodyguards, no drivers, just a book in his hands and a thermos of black coffee growing colder by the minute. The sky was gray. He checked the time. 3:16. His chest sank. And then dash footsteps. Soft, hesitant. He looked up. Layla. No makeup, no mask, no performance. Just her, holding a tattered piece of paper. His mother's letter. Lucas stood. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Layla stepped close enough for him to see the tears glinting in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me it was her who found me first?" His voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to ruin it. You were the only thing in my life that hadn't been touched by my family's corruption. I didn't want you to feel like a ghost had chosen you for me." "She didn't," Layla said softly. "You did." Lucas blinked back emotion. "And I'd do it again, even if you never forgave me. Even if you hated me forever." Layla reached for his hand, intertwined her fingers with his. "You were right," she said. "Love doesn't run. It roots, and sometimes it breaks ground in places we never expected." He laughed under his breath. "Broken and beautiful. So what now?" She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "Now," she whispered, "we plant something real." And for the first time in both their lives, the richest man in the room and the flower girl who'd once been laughed at began again, not in a ballroom, not in a contract, not in the spotlight, but in a park, surrounded by pigeons and wild blooms and the quiet kind of love that doesn't shout, but stays. The spring air was different this year, softer, cleaner, more honest. Central Park breathed again. Trees stretched like they were waking up after years of silence. Flowers, wild, uninvited, unmanicured, pushed their way through cracks in the soil and bloomed without apology. They didn't care if anyone thought they were beautiful. They simply were, just like her. Layla Torres sat on the bench near the old fountain. A sketchpad balanced on her lap. Her fingers were smudged with charcoal. Her wild curls framed her face, windswept and untouched. She didn't wear designer gowns anymore. Not out of rebellion, but because she didn't need to wear someone else's name to know her own. Beside her, Lucas Alden watched in silence, not the way he used to, like he was studying her, or testing her, or trying to make her fit into a plan. Now, he watched like a man who knew he'd almost lost the only thing that had ever been real. "You didn't finish the shading," he said, nodding toward her sketch. Layla smirked. "I was waiting for the light to change." He chuckled. "You still draw like a poet, and you still love like a strategist," she teased, glancing sideways. "But you're getting better." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Am I?" "You haven't tried to fix me in 3 months," she said. "I'd call that progress." Lucas smiled. A real one, the kind that touched the corners of his tired eyes. He'd given up his empire. He'd turned down the board's offer to return under new terms. He'd refused every interview, every spin, every headline. Instead, he'd helped Layla open a community art space. The Alden Foundation was no longer a monument to status. It had been reborn as something small, quiet, meaningful. The first mural they painted together stood at the center of Brooklyn's East End. Hands cradling a single flower breaking through concrete. They named it Reclamation. But not everyone had let go. To nights before the grand opening of their art center, a letter arrived at the flower shop. No stamp. No name. Just a folded piece of black vellum slipped beneath the door after dark. Layla read it once, then again, then handed it to Lucas. "You built your new life on ashes, but not all of us have forgotten. The fire, truth is still buried. Ask him about Cypress Hill. Ask him what happened the night the books were burned." Layla looked up at Lucas. His face had gone pale. "What is this?" she asked softly. Lucas sat down, eyes never leaving the paper. "It's the one thing I hope would stay buried. Then we dig it up," she said. 3 hours later, they were parked outside an abandoned building on Cypress Hill. The windows were boarded, the doors chained. Graffiti covered the bricks, mostly names and dates. But above the entrance, someone had painted a single word: "guilt." Lucas stepped out of the car. "This was one of the first schools my father tried to shut down," he explained. "It was a sanctuary for low-income kids, mostly children of immigrants. The land was worth millions, so he wanted it gone." "And you?" Layla asked. "I signed the order," he said. 6 years ago. I didn't read the details. I just signed." They set fire to the records that same week, legal and financial, to cover the buyout. That's what the letter meant. The books. Layla stood in front of the chained door. So this is the last piece of him you haven't faced. Lucas nodded. Double quotes. Then let's burn his legacy properly, she said. The next morning, they went to the press not with a statement, but with documentation. Layla and Lucas revealed the entire Cypress Hill cover-up. How the Alden Corporation had erased history to expand wealth. How Lucas, as a young executive, had signed without question. And how now, as a different man, he was buying the land back with personal funds to rebuild it as a public arts and literacy school. Under Layla's non-profit. The media didn't know what to do with them anymore. There was no scandal, no spin. Only redemption. Earned, not claimed. On the day of the art center's opening, hundreds gathered beneath a sky streaked with gold and lavender. The city mayor came. So did kids from 5 boroughs. People brought flowers, not expensive bouquets, but marigolds, violets, tulips in paper bags. Humble offerings for the woman who had become a symbol of quiet resilience. As Layla stood on stage, Lucas at her side, she looked out over the crowd and said, "They laughed at me once, because I wore the wrong dress, because I didn't speak the right way, because I didn't come from their world." She paused, and now that world is standing in mine. Applause erupted, but as she stepped off the stage, Lucas pulled her aside. "Wait," he said, "there's one more thing." He reached into his jacket and handed her a velvet box. "Before you say anything," he whispered, "this isn't about fixing what we broke. This is about building what we've already started." He opened the box. Inside, not a diamond, but a simple silver band etched with wildflowers. And 3 words engraved inside, "No more pretending." Layla stared at the ring. Then at the man who had once ruined her night and rebuilt her world. She took the ring, slipped it onto her own finger, then kissed him. Not as the girl he saved, not as the woman he lost, but as the one who had chosen him, fully awake. They never went back to the ballroom. But years later, the same estate hosted a fundraiser for the Cypress Hill School. And when a new girl in a handmade dress tripped on the marble steps, laughter filled the air, until a familiar voice cut through it. "Be careful who you laugh at," Layla said. Standing with Lucas and their daughter in her arms, "You might be mocking the future." And just like that, the room remembered that the richest man in the room once called a florist his wife, and the world never looked the same again.